Hola a todos, how we doing? This is our second video for the week, looking to see if I can be helpful with your questions. So let's get started. The first article, I have these in the opposite order. And also, with regards to our questions, I'm going to go in the same order that I did the video earlier this week. So all the co-creation ones are going first. Question. What methods have proven to be effective for companies to effectively engage in dialogue with the customer without the conversation dying? Something that, I've been directly or indirectly harping for the most of the semester here is that you have to understand that, we're asked, the way this question's asked, it's asked from the company's perspective. But the thing is, it's the company wants the dialogue, but it's the customers who are doing the dialogue. So the company has to stand back a little bit and find ways to support the dialogue that's already having. Having an easy to use platform for the conversation. Yes. Not, because if the platform for them to have a conversation on is complicated, you're going to prevent them from doing so. But the other thing is kind of staying out of their way. Hopefully you'll give them experiences for a conversation, such as some kind of an event marketing, a Jeep Jamboree, something along those lines. And if it's not an in-person one, perhaps you can give them a video or some kind of a demonstration YouTube channel. And then from there, you can listen to the conversations and do the questions. Another way to think about it is, it's the same way we're running our class, right? I give you Harvard Business Review articles. I ask for some kind of a thing, and we have this conversation because of the system and the format we've set up. So maybe a company can do something like that. What are some notable consumer communities? I think the Nike Plus community is incredibly strong. But the one that may surprise you is do a Google search of Procter & Gamble and online consumer communities, and you're going to come up with at least 12 or 15 or at least an article or so that highlights what Procter & Gamble does. So what Procter & Gamble does is they take a topic area and they create a blog or community around a particular topic area. And in the process of that topic area, they insert their products into the conversation. So they might have a mommy blog that has a lot of infant, toddler kind of conversation going. But guess what? They have Pampers. And Pampers is a major sponsor on that site. And none of these sites are called Pampers.com or ProcterandGamble.com. There is a very interesting one. And I'm trying to think of the toilet paper brand, but they created an app. This is toilet paper, by the way. A toilet paper company created an app. Now, before I say what the app is, just think about that for a second. All right, I have an app on my phone, and it's an app for toilet paper. And what the app is are the cleanest bathrooms in the city, public bathrooms. And people vote whether this is a good bathroom or not. So you could flip open the app to try to find the nearest bathroom. That's useful. That's pretty neat. Distinguishing personalization versus customization. Which of these two product features has been proven to be more appealing to the customer? Well, please forgive me for saying this, but it depends. It depends on the context, and it depends on, on the product class. Nike only does personalization. You cannot get the shoe size differently for your left foot or your right foot. They do that for professional athletes, obviously, but they do not do it for us. So there only is a personalization option. We had our, remember we had a Joseph Pine article, the think about it, this is almost like a mass customization question. We had transparent or not transparent, and the product changed and the product didn't change, and there was 4 quadrants. So really it depends on the context. Question. How does a company shape consumer expectations so that the consumer is ready for what is next? Isn't this taking away the co-creation aspect and manipulating the consumer? How does a company shape consumer expectations so the consumer is ready for what is next? So, and perhaps I may not be answering these questions correctly, but let me give this a stab. So, this is in terms of a company that announces products somewhat in secrecy, not doing the co-creation stuff, and putting the product out ahead. I'm not even saying this right. So basically, when I read this, it's like what Apple's doing. Apple does not tell you what's coming up next, what it's going to be, or when. I'm not sure that is the smartest route to go. I'm really not sure that is the smartest route to go. It works for Apple. I think Apple's a unique outlier case in many, many examples. But I don't know about this manipulating the customer. Perhaps if this is really bugging you, you shoot me an email and see if you can give me a little more detail and I can get into that. I'm not sure what the question is here. The idea of the customer as a collaborator, but also as a competition, is a great one. I agree. It's very interesting. There is a downside that if you have a customer as a collaborator, that customer could be one of your competitors. Literally one of your major B2B competitors. They're just acting like a customer, and then they're taking those ideas and going back to their company with them. But also, it could be the case that a customer is coming up with ideas. Look at eBay. And PayPal came out. They were customers of eBay. But PayPal came out and created something that was better than what eBay was doing, to the point where eBay eventually bought it for $2 or $3 billion, which is why we have Elon Musk being a billionaire at this point. Since the customer can extract value in a co-creation partnership, is there a way for the company to place controls to limit the customer's creation or extraction of value? Well, I don't know about extraction of value. Because that's for the consumer to determine how much value there is. But there is ways to limit how much co-creation can actually happen. How much? Think about innovation and new product development. Well, do you have all consumers involved, or do you have a smaller subset of consumers involved? We know all the software companies do beta testing. And you might be a developer for Apple or Microsoft or Google, and you're beta testing. Look what Google did with Google Glass. And even though Google Glass is out, it's really in beta mode. I mean, the first 1.0 version of it was 1,500 people. I think version 2.0, which we're going to see in the next month or so, is going to be about 10,000. That's still a very small number in beta mode. So sure, there's ways to limit how much information or sharing a company does with the consumer. And the company has to decide where the line is. There's some companies that, if you think about Facebook is just a platform, and the consumer creates all the value and all the content. In that situation, Facebook has to be pretty wide open. In other situations, like Google with Google Glass, they don't have to be that wide open. Question. Overall, what would you say the competencies of customers are making it easier or more difficult for companies to operate? Are you saying, this is what I think you're asking, are customers making it easier or more difficult for companies to operate? From the company's perspective, I think it's a hell of a lot more complicated in 2013 than it was in 2003. There is significantly more variables a company has to deal with in 2013 and 2003. You know, for instance, I was getting my MBA in not 1993, but very close to 1993. I'm old, remember that. And when I was getting my MBA, we talked about 5-year strategic plans. Because corporations in 1993 in a pre-Reb were still hierarchical, top-down organizations. It's easier for a firm to plan in a hierarchical manner. You control the plan. In today's world, not only can you not plan more than 12 to 18 months out at any given time, you have significantly more variables both on the customer side and the competition side that make it more difficult for them to operate today. That's why you need to be market oriented. How are the larger companies able to understand the competencies of all its suppliers? Well, these days versus, let's say, General Motors and manufacturing in 1993 or 1983. In 1983 and 1993, General Motors sent specs out, the suppliers made something, shipped it back, and that was it. That was it. And what happens is that larger companies now know that if they bring the suppliers in more during the design stage and the innovation stage, that the suppliers can not only reduce costs in R&D development, not only speed R&D development because they're using some of their designers and engineers and planners as opposed to it all being a General Motors kind of a thing, So the larger companies are pushing some of that stuff out that they did internally, externally. And in the process, the suppliers, the relationship between the suppliers and the company gets tighter, and you tend to work with a smaller amount of suppliers because you want a deeper relationship with these suppliers. I mean, if you think about Walmart makes all its suppliers stock the shelves in the store pretty much. Walmart doesn't exist without its suppliers. Walmart will pick a channel captain for an aisle, let's say men's shaving products. Okay? They'll pick a company and say, okay, Gillette, this is your aisle. You're in charge. And Gillette will actually design the aisle. Because Walmart doesn't want their employees to be doing it because then it's more costly and it doesn't happen as fast. Question. The article claims customers are changing the dynamics of the marketplace. I would agree. Are they, or is it the technology that's changing the dynamics? Technology does not change anything. Humans change things. A perfect analogy is during the Arab Spring a few years back, they kept saying that Twitter caused the revolution. Facebook caused the revolution. And that's not true. There was a culture of discontent in some of these nations. That software does not create a culture of discontent. In addition, humans do all of these actions. It just so happens that their actions are easier to do if they have a platform to do it on. To organize what some of these people were doing in some of these Arab nations, there was a number, Tunisia, etc., 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 Egypt. It was easier for them to accomplish their goals and to communicate and coordinate because of the social networking. The social networking didn't cause it. And we have a situation now that we have consumers, millennials, that are growing up in a culture of participation. And they're growing up in a culture of collaboration. And they're growing up in a culture where technology makes that a hell of a lot easier to do. So they do it more. How do you manage customer diversity? The article really only says what it is and where it comes from. This is an easy question. we go back to our CRM articles, and every one of our CRM articles talked about what's the first thing you do in a CRM strategy? You segment the marketplace. You have some customers that you get a lot more interaction with. You have other customers that are not one of your big fish that you do not have a lot of interaction with. So the bigger customers, bigger revenue streams, you have an 80-20 rule, you have a steep skew. Guess what? That's how you do it. That's how you do it. It's a CRM kind of mentality. If the product is becoming subordinate to the experience, which touch point becomes the most important in order to get the customer to initiate the dialogue? If the product is subordinate to the experience, which touch point becomes the most important in order to get the customer to initiate the dialogue? I think you have to think about which touch point the customer interacts with the firm the most. With CVS, it's the loyalty card and the coupons that are on the back end of the receipt. For other companies, it's a text. For other companies, it's a tweet. For other companies, it's what's on their Facebook page. For other companies, they do it all through a third-party scenario like a Groupon or a Living Social. You have to see how the consumers initiate with the brand, and however they initiate the brand, that's how you juice that entry point. Would providing customers with specific experiences with regards to the products lead to more instances of customers becoming competitors? Would providing customers with specific experiences with regards to the products lead to more instances of customers becoming competitors? It could. It could. I'm just guessing here, but yes. And I think we kind of had a similar question earlier up. It could be the case that more interaction or deeper integration of co-creation, you have a better chance of competition. But you have to also think that if a consumer keeps getting the value out that they want, and they're happy, satisfied, and loyal, I think that's really where the relationship would end. For the consumer to go one step further and create a competitive firm, let's put it this way. All this co-creation of value stuff that I really, really like, and this is, a topic area that I'm really passionate about, I don't have an instance. I don't have an article that says, oh my God, don't do co-creation of value because all you do is create more competitors. I don't have one of those articles to share with you. Okay, next article. We went from 2000 to 2010. Building the Co-Creative Enterprise. We have Ramaswamy of the Co-Creation Partnership there, and we have a new author, which we have a couple articles from him here. Question. Is allowing customers to participate in the design of a product a risky decision? Competitors could figure out your plans much easier this way. Yes, it could. You could have the community closed, not open, i.e., in order for customers to co-create, they would have to be part of a closed social network, like Yammer. Now, could a competitor figure out a way to figure out how to get into Yammer and pretend that they were customers? Sure. But you have to think that whatever they're doing in a co-creative process, if competition finds out about it, it could be the case that they're already 1, 2, or 3 steps behind you. And even if you were able to do everything in secrecy and you brought something out into the marketplace, it's only 6 months later before competition, without knowing anything at all, benchmarks you. Because that's the way competition is these days. So, just look at the smartphone market, all right? Where we had the Pocket PC and we had BlackBerry, and they had 80 to 90% of the market. And Palm Trio, 100% of the market. And then Apple comes out in 2007, and everybody's blown away. But Google's Android came out in 2008. And granted, Android version 1.0 wasn't all that great, But by 2009, Android was significantly better than the 2008 version. By 2010, maybe Apple still had an edge, but Android was pretty good. By 2011 and 2012, it becomes less of a, oh my god, this company has a superior platform, as opposed to, well, which deal do I really like? Because they both do basically the same things kind of well. They both surf the web, they both check your email, they both have apps, and they both have pretty screens. 4 years. What is the next stage in co-creation? How are firms going to get customers even more involved? Because customers will presumably just want more and more access. Agreed. And granted, I'm way outside the box here. Way outside the box. But these 3D printers, because you think about the co-creation articles that we've read so far, they sort of have the consumer collaborating, but that the company creates the end product or service. But now, we're in a situation where the production of the value might actually be done by the consumer itself. And the product that the company creates is in part of this co-creation of value is just something that you put in your house that you can do anything with. A 3D printer. It's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing. When stakeholders have control of how they want to work with one another, that's what I'm thinking, doesn't that create a lot of politics and lack of organization due to conflicting views of many? Yeah, well, if you have two non-market-oriented firms and they only care about their own self-interest, we have a problem. But if you have two firms and the stakeholders have aligned goals and they both have something in it for them, you're not going to have a co-creation of value problem. You're not. And if the relationship starts off well, then you're in good shape. If there is a common set of goals and a common, I know what I'm getting out of the relationship that's going to help me. I know what you're getting out of the relationship that's going to help you. If we work together, we both get something really good out of the relationship. If that kind of conversation doesn't happen, co-creation of value in an efficient way won't happen. How does management know when to step in during instances when stakeholders and or employees have control of their work? Don't have control of their work or have control? Think about it from a coach or a baseball metaphor. If you're a baseball manager and your pitcher's on the mound and you're tracking certain statistics, the ball strike ratio, number of pitches, you're looking at them to see if they're struggling or not. You see if they're always falling behind hitters. You see if the first pitch they throw is a strike and it's declining. You have indicators, but at some point, the management has to step in and take control, or at least guide a little bit more. It's sort of like throw 15 kids into a room and not give them any direction, but say, okay, you 5 go into this corner and color, you 5 go into this corner and play with clay, and you 5 go into this corner and paint. You kind of step in, provide a little organization, go like this, and then you step back out and see qué pasó. And maybe you might need to step back in because the clay people over here, they're just mixing all the colors up and things are just a total mess. And you need to step in to provide more of a framework for them to work in. But the painting people and the coloring kids, they're fine. That is sort of like a co-creation type mentality, where in a hierarchical type environment, there would have been an explicit set of instructions for the coloring people, an explicit set of instructions for the crayon people and the painting people, and then the explicit, the clay, the Play-Doh people over here, they have their own set of instructions. And what they're supposed to do is probably detailed in a PowerPoint thing with a 15-page PowerPoint deck, exactly the 3 different types of shapes they're allowed to make with their Play-Doh, and only those shapes. That's a top-down, old-school, hierarchical type firm. Why haven't more companies adopted the co-creation method? Because it's really, really, really hard. It's really, really hard. And co-creation of value only works if your firm is not locked up in silos and you're not, because multiple different divisions of the firm have to be part of this co-creation process. It's easier not to be a co-created firm. Hierarchical is easier. You're in control of all the variables. You don't have to talk to anybody. You don't have to coordinate with anybody. What are some of the downsides that can come from co-creation? Well, we've already hammered the competitor one enough, but I think the biggest downside to co-creation is time. I think you have to be okay with a time frame and a timeline that would be longer than if you just decided to make all the decisions yourself. I think that's the biggest one. The other big downside, though, is if your firm's not comfortable with complexity and your firm's not comfortable with coordination or cooperation, you're in trouble. That's not optimal. Does co-creation go against the approach of innovation outside the customer's needs when it comes to new product development? Does co-creation go against the approach of innovation outside of a customer's need when it comes to new product development? Outside of the need. Let me finish reading here. In the book, The Innovator's Dilemma, Clay Christensen, it addresses the issue of innovation without being held hostage to customer needs and needs to maintain revenue and market share. Innovation is at the bottom of the market, where there may not be a need by the customers that is obvious. Co-creation would seem to fall into the trap of the innovation dilemma, would it not? Okay, so let's spend a little bit of time here. The classic quote, whether it's accurate or not, is from Henry Ford. And Henry Ford's, I don't do marketing research, or it's something like this. You can Google Henry Ford's famous quote. If I asked people what they wanted, they would have told me a faster horse. Because that's all they know. They could not have dreamed of a car. And Steve Jobs is famous for reiterating this particular quote. He has another one that's actually not correct, and he attributes it to Wayne Gretzky, that says, I don't skate where the puck is, I skate where the puck will be. The same kind of a thing. So what happens is that we have to step away, and I'm going to get to the innovation dilemma thing, to think that innovation is nothing more than something you've never heard of before. There is lots of very good iterative innovation that keeps a particular product class moving and expanding and maintaining their market share. A first-time product coming out of the gates may be difficult to get a lot of co-creation with a large group because guess what? They're not used to something like this. Here, an example would be Microsoft and their Kinect box. Okay, prior to that hitting the marketplace, nothing like that really existed before. So co-creating a product like that would probably not be as advantageous. Now, would you test market it? Yes. After you created it, would you bring in some power users? Yes. So if you think about it from a first time ever created product, maybe you have less co-creation. When you think about a product that's already been on the market for a long time and you're looking for ways to, in a cash cow type mentality, increase market share or maintain market share or maintain loyalty because it's a zero-sum game, co-creation of value is a fantastic way to go. Fantastic way to go. So, yes, you need big picture innovation for first-time new products, but you might also need iterative innovation that keeps the category moving along. Depending on how new the category is with how new the innovation is, first time, or this is like the 5th or 6th version of it, is how much co-creation of value you might want involved. If it's a category that's already established and there's already lots of players, then having the co-creation of value when your competitors already have all their products out there already, then I see it's less of a risk. It's complicated to manage, but I see it's less of a risk. I've been a part of various project initiatives that encourage co-creation of internal processes and system design. Some co-creation projects worked out well and others didn't. The greatest problems always seem to be the politics and failed leadership. What steps would you take up front to build a positive co-creation environment that works out well? Well, I mean, we started with this in week 1. This is market orientation. If people are so worried about their turf and someone makes a suggestion that, impacts someone's turf, then you already have a politics problem internally. As opposed to figuring out what's best for the customer and what's best for long term for the firm. One of the things, no, I'm not going to say that. I don't want to go off on that tangent. But really, if there isn't that conversation of shared goals and what's in it for me in the beginning of the process, and really we're looking for the greater good of the firm or the customers, then guess what? Yeah. I mean, this question started off as it's part of co-creation of internal processes and systems design. I'm assuming this is a bunch of coworkers getting a meeting together and, people all within the firm. Well, maybe if the various functional silos don't like each other for various historical reasons, then you're starting off with a big negative from the get-go. How do you balance giving the freedom to co-create and setting boundaries about what can be co-created? If people feel stifled by what they can and can't be co-created, couldn't the process fail? Yes, it could. But you can also, as part of the co-creation of value process, put explicit boundaries on what can and can't be done. You could say, okay, in this version, we're only going to go this far. This stuff that you're talking about is really interested. We're going to get that in the second iteration, but we need a product to come out in the marketplace. So we're going to limit what we can do with these set of variables, and those new interesting set of variables that you keep asking for, that's going to be for version 2.0. But see, that's management coming in and providing a little bit of instruction and boundaries and guidelines. Otherwise, it's not a free-for-all. Co-creation of value is not a free-for-all. It seems like involving the stakeholders is common sense. Why haven't more companies adopted this strategy? Is management reluctant to cede some of its power? Yes, and yes. Management is extremely egocentric, politics-centric, hierarchical, and they will not cede power to anyone. That's one thing. Then we have the politics and the internal fiefdoms. One of the problems with Microsoft is that the Office division, okay, their goal is to maximize ways to get Office out there. Now, in the process of doing that, they may shortchange some of the other divisions of Microsoft because it's not what's in the best interest of Microsoft in general, just what's in the best interest of Office. It's one of the reasons why Apple does not have the senior vice president of iPad, or the senior vice president of iPod, or the senior vice president of iPhone. If there was a senior vice president of iPod, there has not been a new iPod for 2 years. So here's an individual which would be asking for resources from Apple, saying, my iPods, they gotta be better, let me do this, and we're doing all this other stuff. Meanwhile, by taking those resources and sliding them to a slightly better version of iPod, because that's what the senior VP's job is, they're taking away resources from iPhone and iPad, which is really the two product classes that have the most growth potential for Apple. So Apple doesn't have a senior VP for iPod, iPhone, or iPad. They have someone in charge of, they have a senior VP for hardware, and they have a senior VP for software. And these two individuals make the best decisions based on market growth of how to increase and do the product, how to increase where resources are going to go. Okay, we are at the 35-minute mark for these 3 articles. I'm going to pause for this video, and then I'm going to make another video because this is getting too long. Okay?